The studios discarded actresses for reasons that had nothing to do with ability, from refusing an executive to aging past a marketable window to simply losing a power struggle. A star could be delivering her finest work and still find herself unemployable within a season because the machine had decided against her. Contract records, suspension logs, and biographer research preserve the deliberate choices behind careers that seem to simply vanish. These 12 women were not used up. They were thrown away. In August 1931, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer signed 20-year-old Virginia Bruce to a long-term contract. By 1936, her striking features and soprano voice made her a valuable asset, introducing Cole Porter's "I've Got You Under My Skin" in Born to Dance, and appearing in the Academy Award-winning The Great Ziegfeld. But behind the scenes, the studio's machinery began to quiet. MGM stopped developing starring vehicles for Bruce, shifting her instead into supporting roles and frequent loanouts to rival studios, where she received no salary uplift. When producer Irving Thalberg died, her status slipped further into B-level productions. By 1939, her contract expired, and the studio chose not to renew it. Studio files show her departure was quietly logged as a suspension and non-renewal, allowing her to slip away from the screen without public explanation. The archives reveal no dramatic confrontation or sudden scandal. Instead, they record a career that simply ended because the studio stopped choosing to use her. Madge Evans spent more than 2 decades in the entertainment industry, beginning as a child performer before signing with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1931. She quickly became a reliable leading lady of the early 1930s, with roles in Dinner at 8 and David Copperfield confirming her established standing. Yet her MGM contract expired in 1937 without any located termination or non-renewal notice in the archives. She remained active, appearing on screen at 29 in the 1938 film Sinners in Paradise. But her 1939 marriage to playwright Sidney Kingsley intersected with this contract uncertainty. Rather than a forced exit or a simple choice of marriage over career, her departure occurred in the absence of studio support. MGM made no effort to retain Evans, offering none of the second chances or career rebuilding given to favored stars. The studio met her marketability plateau with a quiet shrug, allowing her to move to television and stage before her final credited screen appearance in 1958. Karen Morley was an established star of the early 1930s, securing prominent roles in major productions like Scarface, Mata Hari, and Dinner at 8. Her career ended through political retaliation rather than artistic decline. Morley engaged heavily in anti-fascist activism and progressive union organizing, drawing the attention of federal investigators. Official records present conflicting timelines of her confrontation with the state. Some archive summaries reference a 1947 transcript, but official House Un-American Activities Committee logs document her formal hearing on November 5, 1952. During that session, Morley refused to answer questions regarding Communist Party affiliation, invoking the protection of the Fifth Amendment. The retaliation was immediate, though quiet. Studios issued no formal termination notices or public dismissal letters. Instead, Morley fell victim to an informal, industry-wide blacklist. Executive files confirm she was barred from major studio lots, as studio heads coordinated behind closed doors. Obituaries in the Los Angeles Times and The Guardian later verified that this coordinated exclusion effectively blocked her from mainstream film roles. The deliberate enforcement of political punishment dictated her lifelong exile from the screen, leaving her without meaningful film employment for the remainder of her life. Ruth Chatterton ruled the early talkies as Paramount's most sophisticated leading lady, commanding the screen in The Rich Are Always With Us and Frisco Jenny. Her prestige peaked in 1936 with her performance in Dodsworth, a film heavily nominated at the Academy Awards. Yet, immediately after this artistic success, the industry's demand for her talents evaporated. Her exit occurred without public scandal. Instead, the mechanism of disposal was quiet. Paramount simply allowed her contract option to lapse without renewal. No authenticated studio memo exists explicitly declaring the 43-year-old actress too old. Rather, her career stopped because Hollywood ceased developing mature female leads. While the studios easily imagined older men in positions of romantic and professional authority, they offered Chatterton only minor, unsympathetic parts. She rejected these diminished offers, leaving Hollywood to pursue independent work in aviation, theater, and novel writing. Her disappearance from the screen was the predictable outcome of a system that quietly discarded its most accomplished actresses once they passed an arbitrary, marketable age. During the late 1920s, Colleen Moore reigned as the definitive face of modern youth. Her trademark bobbed haircut and energetic screen persona made her First National's most valuable asset, generating a massive personal fortune and defining American fashion. Yet this highly specialized screen identity proved surprisingly fragile. In early 1929, Moore renegotiated her contract with First National, a deal that left her with only 2 films before the studio chose not to renew. While popular accounts blame her decline on the arrival of sound, the archival record is more nuanced. No direct executive statements confirm that sound alone ended her career. Instead, her youthful flapper image lost its industrial utility as public tastes and production practices changed. Her final 4 talkies, including The Power and the Glory in 1933 and The Scarlet Letter in 1934, failed to recoup their costs. Studios simply stopped developing projects for her. Faced with an industry that no longer valued her star persona, Moore permanently retired from the screen in the mid-1930s, redirecting her talents toward successful financial investments. Her rapid exit proved that even the highest level of silent-era popularity offered no protection once the studio machine changed direction. Dorothy McHale was a major First National star whose popularity rested on frank, morally complex, and independent roles during the pre-code era. When the Motion Picture Production Code began strict enforcement in July 1934, this new regulatory mechanism targeted the exact character types associated with her stardom. Independent, self-reliant women who handled adult themes with sexual autonomy and moral complexity were suddenly restricted or forbidden on screen. The archival record shows no coordinated effort by First National or Warner Brothers to reinvent McHale's star persona to fit this conservative market. To determine the exact institutional choices behind this shift, researchers still require access to the Production Code Administration's internal submissions, correspondence on cuts, and contemporary trade coverage. Without these files, her sudden absence from major studio releases stands as a clear casualty of shifting censorship rather than lost ability. While popular accounts frequently link her eventual relocation to Hawaii directly to this professional decline, her quiet withdrawal from the film industry occurred years later and must be sourced as an independent biographical event. Her trajectory raises a fundamental, uncomfortable question about the classic studio system. Does an actress's popularity or dramatic talent matter when the regulatory system outlaws the very identity that made her a star? By 1929, Anita Page was one of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's most valuable youth market stars, anchoring early sound landmarks like Our Dancing Daughters and the Academy Award-winning The Broadway Melody. The studio's publicity department reported that Page received over 10,000 fan letters per week, a volume rivaling Greta Garbo. Yet, in the studio system, a packed fan mail department did not translate to executive leverage. MGM's front office controlled her roles and billing with absolute authority, showing that public enthusiasm could easily be overridden by executive indifference. In 1933, at the reported age of 23, Page walked away from MGM. While official studio files recorded a mutual termination and a contract payout, later accounts paint a more contentious picture. Page spent decades stating she was forced out after rejecting the sexual advances of studio chief Louis B. Mayer, a conflict not documented in surviving personnel ledgers. Her departure was initially framed as a voluntary retirement for domestic life, but her subsequent sporadic returns to low-budget films in later decades proved she was never entirely finished with the screen. She was simply finished with a system that chose to look away. Lila Lee established herself as a major leading lady for Paramount, transitioning successfully from silent films to early talkies. But her career soon ran into a different kind of industry barrier, the limits of studio accommodation for illness. Lee faced recurring struggles with tuberculosis, a condition that repeatedly forced her away from the cameras for treatment. In the studio system, an actress's physical availability was a contractual obligation. When health crises interrupted production, studios often utilized clauses that allowed them to suspend performers without pay or refuse contract renewals. Yet the exact administrative steps Paramount took remain obscured. No official suspension notices or contract non-renewal letters regarding her health have been located in surviving archives. This lack of documentation leaves a significant gap in the historical record, but the trajectory of her career speaks clearly. Without studio support or structured time to recover, Lee was forced into lower-budget, independent productions. Her experience suggests that in classical Hollywood, a star's value was strictly tied to continuous, uninterrupted utility. For performers facing long-term illness, the lack of institutional patience made a return to top-tier stardom nearly impossible. Marguerite Churchill established herself as a capable leading lady for Fox and First National during the early years of sound. Her most significant early performance came in 1930, when she starred in the outdoor epic The Big Trail. In 1933, she married fellow Fox star George O'Brien, a personal milestone that altered her career path. Her 5-year contract option with Fox expired after the 1936 film Legion of Terror, and the studio chose not to renew the agreement. Surviving archival records contain no correspondence showing that Fox executives attempted to retain her, nor is there proof of a formal refusal to work on her part. Her later return attempts, which included brief appearances in the 1950s, yielded only sporadic offers. Rather than treating her absence as a temporary pause, the studio system treated her departure as a permanent exit. Churchill's personal choices were met with institutional indifference. Once she stepped outside the studio gates, the professional door never reopened, leaving a once prominent actress to spend decades in obscurity. Sally Blaine experienced a different form of studio control: steady, unpromoted labor. As a member of the Young acting family and the elder sister of Loretta Young, Blaine possessed both talent and family pedigree. Yet, while studios built her sister into a major star, they treated Blaine as a utility player. Paramount signed her to a long-term contract in the late 1920s, utilizing her for consistent work but relegating her to secondary ensemble parts. Studio billing sheets and press books show her name in smaller print than stars like Barbara Stanwyck, even with comparable screen time. The archival record shows no dramatic firing or sudden contract break. Instead, Paramount simply let her options expire in the early 1950s without ever investing in a major publicity campaign. Left without studio backing, she transitioned to low-budget freelance work before her final screen credit. In 1955, her career quietly dissolved by institutional indifference. In 1932, RKO Pictures signed Danish model Gwylie Andre, launching a massive publicity campaign to market her as the next Greta Garbo. Under production chief David O. Selznick, the studio prioritized image over training, flooding trade papers with portraits before she ever set foot on a set. André immediately received leading roles in Roar of the Dragon and Secrets of the French Police. Yet surviving archives contain no official RKO campaign files or screen test records to document her development. Instead, her career trajectory must be traced through trade casting sheets. Following critical backlash to her performance in 1933's No Other Woman, RKO's investment logic shifted. Rather than developing her talent, the studio treated her as a failed product and withdrew support. André was quickly demoted to minor features like Meet the Boyfriend in 1937, eventually slipping into uncredited bit parts in A Woman's Face and The Falcon's Brother. Her screen career ended entirely by 1942, decades before she died in a Venice, California apartment fire on February 5, 1959. In the late silent and early sound eras, Universal contract player Barbara Kent established herself as a popular leading lady, starring alongside Harold Lloyd in Welcome Danger and Feet First. But stardom, under the studio system, required more than on-screen performance. It demanded compliance with aggressive publicity machinery, from controlled biographical profiles to mandatory fan interactions. When Kent's screen appearances declined sharply in the mid-1930s, rumors emerged that her quiet retreat was a consequence of resisting these studio publicity demands. While archival records do not definitively prove that her reluctance to cooperate caused her contract non-renewal, her subsequent career trajectory remains a distinct case of professional withdrawal. Rather than a tragic exile, Kent's departure from Hollywood appears to be a deliberate choice to prioritize personal autonomy. She stepped away from the cameras, married, and lived a quiet, private life that lasted over a century, passing away in 2011. Her long life challenges the industry assumption that a fading career represents a personal failure, raising a final, unresolved question. Was Barbara Kent forgotten by Hollywood, or did she simply choose to withhold herself from it? Today, the myth of the naturally fading star still protects the industry's most ruthless decisions. As modern entertainment relies on algorithmic metrics and corporate consolidation, the power to erase talent remains concentrated in executive suites. The archival record reminds us that disappearances are rarely accidents. They are choices. What do you think of this legacy? Share your thoughts below. Hollywood's golden age sold an image of porcelain glamour, studio elegance, and unshakable grace. Behind the soundstage walls, some of its working stars hid habits so disturbing that veteran co-stars walked off sets, refused to share dressing rooms, or demanded reshoots without them. Court documents, on-set memos, and biographer interviews preserve what the publicity machines tried to bury. These are the forgotten faces, whose private lives proved uglier than any villain the studios ever wrote. Constance Bennett's name glimmered above the title, but her influence reached far beyond the marquee. Buried in a Warner Brothers production report from 1936, Box ID WBPR 1936-07, is a memo that reads less like a routine expense note and more like a tally of power. The line item, $3,200, an entire week's crew wages, was charged to the lighting department, attributed to Bennett's demand that every scene be relit and every camera rebuilt to flatter her left profile. On a Depression-era shoot, this sum could have funded a minor feature. Instead, it bought silence and compliance, as gaffers scrambled to swap gels and re-angle key lights until Bennett approved her reflection in the test frame. The technical crew grumbled, but it was the other stars who felt the cost most keenly. Joan Blondell, herself no stranger to the studio's hierarchy, later recalled, "No one could share a frame with Constance unless she'd signed off on the lighting. I learned to stay out of her way or risk vanishing in the shadows." The resentment filtered through the cast like bad air, infecting even the most seasoned professionals. Directors scheduled scenes around Bennett's preferences, and production delays rippled through the call sheets. The studio's publicity machine spun these demands as evidence of artistic standards. Off the record, producers called it extortion by vanity. The paper trail, stamped with the Warner logo, survives as proof that the cost of maintaining a star's illusion was measured not just in dollars, but in the patience and pride of everyone forced to orbit her spotlight. Paramount's expense ledger for 1928, stamped PER 1928 EXP001, lists a single line that sent shockwaves through the accounting office. $12,500, billed as Negri, personal, Paris-style soiree, animal rental, security. The sum eclipsed the annual wage of a junior producer, but for Pola Negri, restraint was a foreign concept. That year, her name appeared on a call sheet with a handwritten note in the margin. It read, "Cheetah to be delivered by 8 in the morning, no substitutions." The animal, a full-grown cheetah on a jeweled leash, arrived with its own handler and a special dietary order, raw steak twice daily. Crew members refused to step onto the set until the beast was caged, and a gaffer filed a grievance after the cheetah lunged at a lighting stand, scattering carbon arcs and sending the set into chaos. The studio paid a city animal control fine, quietly added to the production budget, and issued a memo warning all departments to avoid unnecessary proximity to Miss Negri's pet. Negri's appetite for spectacle was not confined to animals. One assistant director, quoted in a 1932 oral history, described her habit of staging fainting spells whenever a scene failed to meet her standards. He said she would collapse onto the chaise, call for imported champagne, and refuse to rise until the director apologized in French. Paramount's ledgers, call sheets, and crew statements paint a picture of extravagance that bordered on the surreal. What began as a star's privilege became a daily disruption, the cost measured not just in dollars, but in the nerves and tempers of everyone forced to accommodate her whims. A line on an LAPD arrest docket, file LA 44108, tells a story that never made the fan magazines. On September 19, 1944, Miriam Hopkins was booked for illegal possession of phenobarbital tablets, barbiturates prescribed for anxiety and insomnia, but tightly controlled under California law. The arrest did not come from a late-night raid or a tabloid sting. It followed a quiet tip from within the studio. The police report, dry and clinical, lists Hopkins's address and the number of tablets seized. There is no mention of bruised egos or the whispered warnings among the crew, but another document, an affidavit filed with the Screen Actors Guild and archived as USC Cam A12, fills in the shadows. Cinematographer James Wong, who worked with Hopkins on The Heiress, swore under penalty of perjury that he saw her taking tablets from a silver case before morning call and again after lunch. He described unpredictable mood swings, sudden outbursts, and long, inexplicable pauses during filming. On more than one occasion, Hopkins stumbled through her lines or failed to show up for blocking, forcing the assistant director to rewrite the day's schedule. Wong's statement closes with a line that rippled through the union. Her condition made it impossible to guarantee the safety or performance of the cast. Word of Hopkins' arrest and the crew's affidavit reached the union office within a week. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees circulated a memo warning producers to monitor chemical impairment on set. For the first time, the conversation shifted from diva antics to prescription dependency as a workplace hazard. Hopkins' name, once synonymous with wit and elegance, now appeared on a legal sheet alongside the evidence of her unraveling. The official record left no room for rumor, just the cold, steady progression from glamour to sedation and the collateral damage left behind. Mae Murray's decline is tangled in a web of rumors and sealed records. Her own memoir, dictated in 1959 and now boxed away at USC, tells of a suicide note discovered in a Beverly Hills hotel room in 1932. The manuscript page details a frantic midnight scene, Murray's family summoned, police arriving, a note allegedly placed on the bedside table. Yet the original coroner's file, accessioned as 1932 SR 17, remains locked behind legal restrictions. No public record confirms the note's existence. Instead, a transcript from the California State Archives contains sworn testimony from Murray's brother, flatly denying any suicide attempt or note. The contradiction lingers, unresolved, as the studio quietly distanced itself from a star whose personal turmoil could no longer be spun into a narrative of misunderstood genius. Diana Barrymore's unraveling left fewer gaps for speculation. In 1942, her name appears in the sealed patient chart 1942 DB001 at UCLA Medical Center. The only accessible trace is a nurse's log that reads, Ms. Barrymore, agitation, refused medication. The log records a 12-day medical hold, a period marked by erratic behavior and repeated refusals to cooperate with staff. Family letters stored in the Billy Rose Theater Division describe the aftermath: Barrymore's habit of mixing seconal with bourbon, and a set left in chaos after she vomited in her dressing room. Studio executives, once eager to promote her as Hollywood royalty, now flagged her file for growing health dangers. The sealed medical records and terse nurses' notes stand as silent witnesses to a private decline. The studio could no longer manage or disguise. The boundaries of rumor and record blur, but the evidence of collapse is impossible to ignore. 12 days appear in the Patton State Hospital admission log, each stamped with the name Gail Russell. The record, filed as PSH 1943-014, lists her diagnosis as a psychotic episode, with a note that discharge was granted only after a studio attorney intervened. The hospital's register shows no visitors, no flowers, only a daily checkmark by the attending physician. Russell's absence from the lot went unexplained in the trade press. Warner Brothers quietly issued a revised call sheet, moving her name to the bottom, and a studio lawyer drafted a letter warning staff not to discuss her whereabouts. The production's continuity report lists her return as unremarkable, but a crew memo now in the Texas Southwest Collections describes her arriving for work with trembling hands and a script marked by water stains. In the spring of 1953, Veronica Lake's vanishing act played out with even less ceremony. A California Highway Patrol crash record, CHP 1953221, details a collision on Brentwood Drive. The driver, listed as Connie Keene, produced an alias card later traced to Lake. The report notes the smell of alcohol and a passenger's complaint of being left at the scene. That same week, the studio morning call sheet was scribbled with a warning: Lake, do not schedule before noon. A production assistant's log recovered from the Stanford University libraries records a string of missed calls and a day when Lake was found asleep behind the soundstage, still in last night's costume. Both women's struggles were kept from the public by a wall of studio secrecy. Hospital logs vanished into restricted archives, and police reports were buried under alternate names. The cost of this concealment was measured not just in ruined schedules, but in reputations that quietly slid from stardom into rumor and silence. Mary Astor's secrets did not stay locked away. In the summer of 1936, the Los Angeles Superior Court convened Case 1936-067, a custody battle that would drag her private life into the harshest possible light. The judge ordered Astor's personal diary into evidence, a blue leather volume, its pages crowded with confessions and longing. On July 29th, the court clerk read aloud, "I feel empty. The studio's pressure crushes me." The words, meant for no eyes but her own, echoed through the courtroom and spilled into the next day's headlines. Reporters packed every seat, scribbling down each line as if they were lines from a script. The transcript, still filed under LA-SC 1936-067, records the moment Astor's intimate world became public property. Warner Brothers publicists, alerted by an internal memo, WBPR 1936-Z, scrambled to contain the fallout. The studio's legal team drafted statements, while the PR department issued a directive. No comment on diary contents. Stress Astor's professionalism. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Studio executives feared the diary's revelations would breach Astor's morality clause, opening the door to contract suspension or worse. The legal wrangling transformed a family dispute into a spectacle of humiliation, with Astor's vulnerabilities dissected in open court. For co-stars and crew, the message was chilling. Nothing written in private was safe from public exposure when the studio's interests or reputation were at stake. The diary, once a silent confidant, had become a weapon wielded by lawyers and reporters alike, turning personal pain into front-page scandal. Linda Darnell's final hours are preserved in the language of a fire report, Chicago Fire Department File 6504D. The document lists the time of ignition at 2:38 in the morning in a modest Glenview home. Darnell, once the luminous ingenue of Fox's Technicolor era, was found in a guest bedroom surrounded by empty gin bottles and the bitter smell of scorched fabric. Crew members from her last film had whispered about the thermos she carried onto set, always filled with gin, sewn into her costume lining by a wardrobe assistant, who later told a union investigator that she never let it out of her sight. The blaze moved fast. The official record clocks the flashover at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. By the time firefighters forced the door, superheated gases had already filled the room. Darnell was pulled from the carpet, her hands clutching the hem of her nightgown. The cause of death was listed as inhalation and third-degree burns. The coroner's note, attached to the incident file, mentions the presence of liquor in her system, but the studio's only public statement called it a tragic accident. Across the Atlantic, Maria Montez's last moments unfolded in a Parisian hotel. The Paris Prefecture police file, PR 51BT, details her obsession with mirrors. Staff recalled her habit of spending hours admiring her reflection and adjusting the placement of every glass in the suite. On September 7, 1951, Montez was found in a bathtub filled with water measured at 113 degrees Celsius, and her skin was marked by severe scalding. The hotel maid testified that Montez insisted on hotter water, ignoring warnings. The autopsy listed thermal shock as the cause of death. No evidence of foul play was found, only a fixation that turned fatal in the silence of a locked bathroom. For both women, the habits that once seemed like private quirks, Darnell's hidden gin and Montez's mirror rituals, became the details that filled out their police and fire files. The cost of unchecked compulsion was no longer measured in studio delays or strained co-star relations, but in forensic notes and final statements. The glamour faded in the glare of official reports, leaving only the record of what could not be managed, spun, or denied. A single witness sheet, stamped Los Angeles Police Department File T-22-1922, records Mabel Norman's presence at the scene of director William Desmond Taylor's unsolved murder. Her name, once synonymous with slapstick brilliance, became a fixture in police ledgers and hospital registries. The official record describes a woman increasingly isolated, arrested for public intoxication, hospitalized for a morphine overdose, and trailed by rumors of addiction that no studio press agent could suppress. The paper trail, cold and methodical, details a procession of interventions that never restored her place in the industry or her peace of mind. Frances Farmer's dissent is preserved in the Western State Hospital Order, WSH 48021. The admission file lists her as non-compliant, resistant to staff, and notes a sequence of insulin shock treatments, doses climbing as high as 90 units per session. The log records no visitors, only daily vital signs and a final notation. Patient withdrawn, unresponsive. The hospital's corridors became farmer's world, her fame reduced to a line in an institutional ledger. Even as headlines speculated about her sanity, the documentation left no room for ambiguity. She was a ward of the state, her autonomy stripped by court order and medical decree. Marie Prevost's final record is a coroner's report. Laco, CR 1937-099, filed in a Los Angeles basement. The report lists malnutrition as the primary cause of death. A neighbor's statement mentions a dachshund found beside Prevost's body, the animal having survived by gnawing scraps from empty cans. No studio sent flowers, and no family claimed her remains for days. The official file closes with a single sentence: deceased found alone, no assets, no next of kin. For Normand, Farmer, and Prevost, the institutions that once promised stardom became the agents of their erasure. The signatures on witness sheets, hospital orders, and coroner's forms outlasted the applause, recording not just the end of a career, but the quiet, bureaucratic machinery that processed their decline. Each document stands as evidence of a system that intervened only to contain, never to save. On October 23, 1951, Barbara Payton's name entered the Beverly Hills police blotter not as a rising star, but as the battered center of a midnight brawl. File 51 BH 332 details the aftermath. Franchot Tone was left with a fractured cheekbone and 18 stitches. Payton herself was bloodied and unsteady, and Tom Neal was hauled in for assault. The official report lists overturned tables, broken glass, and a crowd of onlookers that spilled from the Sunset Strip Cafe into the street. By dawn, the arrest docket had grown. Payton, charged with disorderly conduct, refused to sign her statement. The court clerk's notes record a second entry, prostitution charges later dismissed for lack of evidence, but not before her name appeared in the city's vice file. Studio lawyers, desperate to stem the headlines, failed to keep the details from the trades. Across the country, Tallulah Bankhead's arrest on April 12, 1935 is preserved in NYPD case IR 35-2123. The charge was public indecency after Bankhead was found striding nude through the orchestra pit of the Paramount Theater. The booking sheet lists a fine of $250 and a 2-day jail sentence. A secondary file, opened by the Federal Theater Project, notes her refusal to dress and an officer's observation of white powder residue on the holding cell bench. The FTP cancellation telegram, archived as RG71FT17, arrived 3 days later, ordering immediate cessation of all public performances and recording a loss of $4,000. The show's cast was dismissed by telegram, the stage left dark and unpaid. A letter dated June 18, 1939, from a stagehand to the Federal Theater Project office describes Bankhead's last night, her laughter echoing off the empty seats, a flask passed hand to hand, and a whisper that cocaine was her only comfort. The official record closes with a single line, no further engagement. Together, these files, police reports, court dockets, and cancellation memos pile up in a relentless cascade. Each document strips away another layer of the manufactured image, leaving only the raw residue of violence, exposure, and addiction. The spectacle was never just on the screen. It was written into the ledgers, stamped on the arrest reports, and telegraphed across the country, evidence that no studio could erase. Even now, Hollywood trades in illusions, public faces crafted to distract from private collapse. Studio archives remain locked, reputations fiercely guarded, and uncomfortable truths excised from official histories. As new generations chase fame, the machinery that once hid so much still grinds on. The shadows behind the spotlight are never far away. What we refuse to see we risk repeating. Share your thoughts below.
You've been scammed. Hollywood didn't just sell you movies, it sold you fake lives, scripted love stories, and actors pretending to be people they never were. Fake identities. Hollywood isn't just about make-believe on screen. For decades, studios controlled every detail of their stars' lives, including their names, ages, and backgrounds. If someone didn't fit the perfect Hollywood mold, they were remade from the ground up. Take Rita Hayworth. She was born Margarita Cancino, but Columbia Pictures thought her name and dark hair were too foreign. The fix? A painful makeover. Her hairline was raised through electrolysis, her hair was dyed red, and just like that, a brand new star was born. Rock Hudson was never really Rock Hudson. His real name was Roy Harold Scherer Jr., but his agent, Henry Wilson, wanted something stronger, more masculine. The studio also erased details about his personal life, making sure the public saw only the leading man fantasy. Jean Harlow's birth year? Faked. Studios made her younger to fit their narrative. Judy Garland's image as the girl next door? A total illusion. Behind the scenes, MGM forced her onto a brutal diet of pills to keep her thin and working long hours. Some lies went deeper. Loretta Young's supposed adoption of a child? That was actually her own daughter, secretly born after an affair with Clark Gable. But Hollywood couldn't let that scandal go public, so they crafted a fake adoption story. Back then, if an actor didn't fit the perfect Hollywood fantasy, they got rewritten. Didn't sound American enough? They changed your name? Didn't look the part? They forced makeovers. Had a personal life that didn't match their image? That was buried. Studios weren't just making movies. They were building illusions, selling audiences a fantasy both on screen and off. And if a star didn't play along, they could kiss their career goodbye. Fake Hollywood love stories. Hollywood didn't just rewrite backgrounds, it scripted relationships too. If a star's real love life didn't fit their image, studios stepped in and fixed it. Rock Hudson was America's heartthrob, but the studio couldn't let fans know he was gay, so they staged a quickie marriage with Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary. The press ate it up, and Hudson kept his leading man status. Judy Garland had her own love life controlled by MGM. The studio forced her into relationships that looked good in magazines, including a publicized romance with Mickey Rooney. It wasn't real, but it sold tickets. Jean Harlow was known as the ultimate bombshell, so when she got involved with Paul Byrne, a much older MGM executive, the studio promoted it as a great love story. But 2 months after their wedding, Byrne died in what was officially ruled a suicide. Hollywood went into damage control, spinning the story to protect Harlow's reputation. Even Tab Hunter, another closeted actor, was given fake girlfriends like Natalie Wood to keep up appearances. The press played along, reporting on dates that never actually happened. And then there was Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher. Hollywood sold them as the perfect couple, young, in love, and America's sweethearts. But when Fisher left Reynolds for Elizabeth Taylor, the public was outraged. The studios scrambled, painting Reynolds as the wronged woman and Taylor as the villain, though the truth was far more complicated. For decades, Hollywood ran a matchmaking machine, not for love but for headlines. Stars were paired off, breakups were staged, and entire marriages were set up just to control public perception. The wholesome stars with dark secrets. Hollywood loves a good clean-cut image, but behind the smiles and staged interviews, some of its biggest stars had secrets the studios worked overtime to hide. Bing Crosby was the ultimate family man. At least, that's what the public saw. Off-screen, his son later described him as a strict and sometimes violent father. The studios kept that part quiet, making sure audiences only saw the charming crooner. Fred Astaire was sold as the gentleman of dance, but many of his co-stars didn't see him that way. He was known for his brutal perfectionism and sometimes treated his dance partners harshly. The truth didn't fit his brand, so Hollywood kept it out of sight. Then there was Joan Crawford, the elegant leading lady. While she dazzled on screen, her adopted daughter, Christina, later exposed the truth in Mommy Dearest, a book that described Crawford's behind-the-scenes temper and alleged abuse. The studios, of course, had always portrayed her as a loving mother. Walt Disney built an empire on family-friendly entertainment, but his personal relationships with employees and his views on unions weren't as magical. His company projected an image of warmth and creativity while quietly silencing critics. Even Lucille Ball, America's comedy sweetheart, had her share of secrets. Studios worked to downplay her brief involvement with the Communist Party to keep her out of scandal. Had the public known at the time, it could have ended her career. Hollywood had a formula: market the actors as perfect, erase anything that didn't fit, and make sure the press played along. If a star had a bad reputation, it was buried. If they had a scandal, it was covered up. And if they ever spoke out about the industry's control, they were replaced. Actors who faked their stunts. Hollywood loves to sell the idea that its biggest stars are fearless, throwing punches, jumping off buildings, and pulling off impossible stunts. But the truth, many of them never even came close. John Wayne, the tough guy cowboy, wasn't as rugged as his movies made him seem. In reality, he avoided dangerous stunts, relying on doubles for fight scenes, horseback riding, and almost anything risky. Yakima Canutt, one of Hollywood's best stuntmen, did many of Wayne's most famous action sequences, including the legendary stagecoach stunt in Stagecoach 1939. Even classic swashbucklers like Errol Flynn needed help. He played fearless adventurers, but during intense sword fights and dangerous leaps, it was usually a double in costume. Studios covered it up because his image as a dashing hero had to stay intact. Then there's Charlton Heston, best known for Ben-Hur, 1959. That incredible chariot race? Most of it was done by stuntman Joe Canutt, who even got injured during a fall that audiences assumed was Heston himself. Fast forward to modern Hollywood, and the myth continues. Tom Cruise is famous for doing his own stunts, and while he really does take risks, he still has doubles for specific shots. The does everything himself story is great for marketing, but the truth is more complicated. Some stars didn't even try to fake it. Drew Barrymore admitted she didn't do a single stunt in Charlie's Angels. It was all professionals in wigs. And in The Fast and the Furious, Paul Walker and Vin Diesel had stunt doubles for most high-risk scenes, despite the franchise's tough guy branding. Hollywood thrives on illusion, and stunts are no different. If an actor's reputation relies on them being a fearless action star, studios will do whatever it takes to keep that fantasy alive. The reality? While the credits roll, the real heroes, the stunt doubles, walk away without the applause. Performances. Hollywood manipulated. Not every legendary performance was the result of raw talent. Sometimes actors were coached, pressured, or even tricked into delivering unforgettable moments. And in some cases, what you saw on screen wasn't even them. Take Shelley Duvall in The Shining, 1980. Her terrified breakdowns weren't just great acting. Director Stanley Kubrick psychologically tormented her for months to get the reaction he wanted. He isolated her from the cast, made her redo scenes over 100 times, and caused so much stress that her hair started falling out. The result? An iconic performance, but at a massive personal cost. Then there's Tippi Hedren in The Birds, 1963. Her final scene, where birds attack her, was completely real. Director Alfred Hitchcock promised mechanical birds, but then threw live ones at her, day after day. Hedren was scratched, pecked, and left emotionally wrecked. The terror you see? It wasn't acting, it was survival. And sometimes, performances were literally replaced. Audrey Hepburn charmed audiences in My Fair Lady, 1964, but that breathtaking singing voice? Not hers. The studio hired Marni Nixon to dub nearly every song. Hepburn only found out after filming, and she was furious. Even in modern Hollywood, manipulation happens. Leonardo DiCaprio's raw pain in Django Unchained, 2012, after smashing a glass? That was real. He actually cut his hand mid-scene but kept acting, so director Quentin Tarantino used it. Some actors were coached to perfection, Marlon Brando struggled with lines in The Godfather, 1972, so cue cards were placed around the set to guide him. That legendary performance? Half of it was reading off hidden scripts. Hollywood sells us the idea of pure, effortless talent. But the truth? Many great performances were manipulated, forced, or even faked. And if an actor didn't deliver, the director made sure they had no choice. Actors who didn't deserve their Oscars. Winning an Oscar is supposed to be the ultimate proof of an actor's talent, but sometimes those golden statues weren't earned. They were bought, stolen, or given for the wrong reasons. Take Elizabeth Taylor's Best Actress win for Butterfield 8, 1960. Even she hated the movie, calling it a piece of garbage. But after she was hospitalized with pneumonia, almost dying, the Academy handed her the award out of sympathy. The performance wasn't her best, but Hollywood loves a comeback story. Then there's Al Pacino. He finally won an Oscar for Scent of a Woman, 1992, but many believe it was just a makeup win for all the times he had been snubbed before. His performances in The Godfather, Serpico, and Dog Day Afternoon were legendary, yet he lost every time. By 1992, the Academy owed him one. And sometimes actors didn't even do the heavy lifting for their award-winning performances. Marlon Brando won Best Actor for The Godfather, 1972, but he refused the award and sent Native American activist Sacheen Littlefeather to reject it in protest. His win became more about politics than the performance itself. John Wayne finally won an Oscar for True Grit, 1969, but most critics agreed it was more of a career award than a performance award. The Academy often gives Oscars not for the best work, but for the best timing. And let's not forget Shakespeare in Love, 1998, beating Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture. It wasn't talent that won, it was an aggressive campaign by producer Harvey Weinstein, who spent millions on marketing and swayed voters with expensive dinners and gifts. Oscars are supposed to reward the best, but behind the scenes, politics, timing, and industry favors played just as big a role as actual talent. If you thought the best performance always won, Hollywood has been lying to you again. The age lies. Hollywood keeps selling. Hollywood has a long history of lying about ages, shaving off years, adding a few, or straight up rewriting birth records. Why? Because in the film industry, age isn't just a number, it's a marketing tool. Doris Day was one of the biggest stars of the 1950s, but for decades, no one knew her real age. She believed she was born in 1924, but when she turned 95, public records revealed she was actually born in 1922. Even she had been fooled by the lie Hollywood created. Jessica Chastain kept her real birth year hidden for years, refusing to confirm how old she was. Why? Because actresses often get pushed out of lead roles once they hit a certain age. When she finally admitted she was born in 1977, fans were shocked. Hollywood had made her seem much younger. Mila Kunis had to lie in the opposite direction. She auditioned for That 70s Show at 14 years old, but because the casting call required actors to be 18, she told producers she would be turning 18 soon. Technically true, but also completely misleading. And then there's Rebel Wilson, who built her career on a larger-than-life persona but kept her birth year a mystery. It wasn't until an old classmate leaked her records that the truth came out. She was several years older than she had claimed. Age manipulation wasn't just for women. Cary Grant and Clark Gable had their ages adjusted early in their careers to make them seem younger. Meanwhile, some actors like Steve McQueen were aged up to make them appear more mature and leading man ready. So when you hear about a young rising star or a veteran actor who's still in their prime, take it with a grain of salt, because the numbers Hollywood gives you aren't always real. Actors Hollywood made look talented. Hollywood has spent decades convincing audiences that certain actors are naturally gifted, but behind the scenes, many relied on tricks, stand-ins, and a whole lot of editing to appear more skilled than they actually were. Take Marilyn Monroe, one of the most famous actresses in history, but on set, she struggled with basic lines, needing up to 60 takes for a single sentence. Directors had to piece together her performances from tiny clips, making her look flawless when, in reality, it was hours of frustration and retakes. Then there's Arnold Schwarzenegger. His early movies had him delivering lines with such a heavy accent that studios dubbed over his voice entirely. In his first film, Hercules in New York, 1970, another actor's voice was used because producers thought audiences wouldn't understand him. Singers weren't always who they seemed either. Natalie Wood starred in West Side Story, 1961, but her singing voice wasn't hers. It was dubbed by Marni Nixon, who secretly sang for several major Hollywood actresses. Deborah Kerr in The King and I, also dubbed. Even Bruce Lee, a martial arts legend, didn't always perform his fight scenes in real time. In some films, his movements were too fast for cameras to capture properly, so editors had to slow them down. Meanwhile, his famous fight sounds? They were often added in post-production to enhance the effect. Some actors couldn't even dance. Jennifer Beals, who played the lead in Flashdance, 1983, barely did any of the dancing herself. A double did the hard moves, and careful editing made it look seamless. So, the next time you're blown away by an actor's incredible talent, ask yourself, how much of it was actually real? The truth about method acting. Dedication. Method acting is often sold as the ultimate mark of dedication. You've heard the stories, actors staying in character 24/7, pushing their bodies to the limit, and suffering for their craft. But here's the truth, a lot of it is just marketing. Take Jared Leto. He made headlines for sending used condoms and dead rats to his Suicide Squad 2016 co-stars to stay in character as the Joker. But when the movie came out, he had barely 10 minutes of screen time. The extreme behavior? Mostly hype. Christian Bale is famous for his drastic body transformations, losing 60 pounds for The Machinist, 2004, then bulking up for Batman Begins, 2005. Impressive? Absolutely. But was it necessary? Some argue no, especially since Hollywood has makeup, prosthetics, and CGI that could achieve the same effect safely. Daniel Day-Lewis is often called the king of method acting, but his dedication sometimes went too far. For My Left Foot, 1989, he refused to leave his wheelchair on set, making crew members carry him everywhere. For Gangs of New York, 2002, he caught pneumonia because he refused to wear modern winter clothes on set. His commitment was real, but at what cost? Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio's infamous The Revenant, 2015 role involved eating raw bison liver and sleeping inside a dead animal carcass. It made for a great story, but the actual film could have been just as convincing without it. And let's talk about Robert De Niro, who gained 60 pounds for Raging Bull, 1980. While impressive, actors like Meryl Streep and Anthony Hopkins have argued that real skill comes from acting, not extreme physical changes. Hollywood loves method acting stories because they make performances sound more impressive. But behind the scenes, many of these so-called dedicated transformations are overhyped, unnecessary, and sometimes just PR stunts. Real talent isn't about starving yourself or staying in character for months. It's about delivering a great performance without making everyone suffer for it. Stars who faked their retirement. Hollywood is full of dramatic exits, big stars announcing they're done with the industry, only to pop up in another movie a few years later. Retirement in Hollywood is often just another publicity stunt. Take Daniel Day-Lewis. In 2017, he made a grand exit, declaring Phantom Thread would be his final film. But this wasn't his first retirement. He quit acting before, only to return in the 90s. Fans still wonder if he'll be back again. Steven Soderbergh, director of Ocean's 11 and Magic Mike, announced he was done with filmmaking in 2013. His reason? Hollywood was too exhausting. But within a few years, he was directing Logan Lucky, 2017, and jumping right back into the business. So much for retirement. Then there's Jay-Z, who held a massive farewell concert in 2003 and announced his retirement from music. The industry mourned. Then, in 2006, he dropped a new album like nothing happened. Turns out the retirement was just a great marketing move. Cher is the queen of fake retirements. In 2002, she embarked on her farewell tour, telling fans this was the last time they'd ever see her perform. That tour lasted 3 years. Then in 2014, she went back on the road. By 2018, she had yet another tour. At this point, fans expect her to retire every few years. Actors don't just retire for dramatic effect. Sometimes it's damage control. Nicolas Cage claimed he was done with major Hollywood movies after years of bad roles. Then, after Pig, 2021 earned critical praise. He walked back his statement. Suddenly, he wasn't done anymore. Hollywood retirements rarely stick. They create hype, nostalgia, and ticket sales. And when the money's right, the retired star suddenly finds a reason to return. Some celebrities defy time, while others, they look like they've lived 1,000 lives. From once golden icons to unrecognizable figures, these 30 stars didn't just age, they transformed in ways no one saw coming. Take Clara Bow, the original It girl. In the Roaring '20s, she was the face of silent film, a flapper-era icon whose energy and charisma made her an audience favorite. But when talkies arrived, so did a new level of scrutiny. She had a Brooklyn accent that didn't match the era's leading lady expectations, and gossip columns were ruthless. Mental health struggles and a series of scandals pushed her further from the spotlight. By the 1940s, she was done with Hollywood, retreating into a life of isolation. But the damage was done. By the time she was in her 50s, she looked years older, the weight of past fame written all over her face. Mickey Rooney had the opposite problem. He never really left the industry, but Hollywood certainly left him behind. A child star who ruled the box office in the 30s and 40s, Rooney aged in a way the studios couldn't package. By adulthood, his boyish looks didn't translate into leading man roles, and his personal life was even messier. 6 marriages, financial ruin, and a reputation for being difficult. The stress aged him prematurely. By the time he was in his later years, he looked nothing like the fresh-faced actor who once stole scenes alongside Judy Garland. And then there was Marlon Brando. In the 50s, he was the gold standard. A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, The Wild One. He was Hollywood's most intense, rugged leading man. But Brando never cared for maintaining a Hollywood image. By the 70s, his weight gain was noticeable. By the 90s, it was staggering. He reportedly weighed over 300 pounds, barely leaving his home in his final years. In the 1960s, Judy Garland is the textbook case of Hollywood's cruelty. She was a child star when MGM turned her into a product, feeding her pills to wake her up, keep her thin, and put her to sleep. By her 40s, the damage was irreversible. The luminous teenager who sang Over the Rainbow had aged beyond her years. Exhaustion, addiction, and years of stress had taken a visible toll. Her once youthful glow was replaced by a frail, weary appearance. By the time she was found dead in a London apartment at 47, her body had already given up long before. But Garland wasn't the only star whose once radiant presence dimmed under the weight of addiction and exhaustion. Richard Burton, known for his booming voice and intense screen presence, was one of the most charismatic actors of his generation. But off-screen, he was just as famous for his hard-drinking lifestyle. By the time he entered his 50s, years of alcohol abuse had left him visibly aged. The dashing star of Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf no longer had the sharp features and commanding presence that once made him irresistible. Friends described his later years as a struggle, with Burton himself admitting, "I have to drink to live and I have to drink to stop living." His once powerful frame grew gaunt, his face deeply lined, proof that decades of excess had finally caught up. Then there's Brigitte Bardot, a sex symbol who ruled the 60s with effortless beauty and undeniable charisma. But unlike many of her contemporaries, she chose to reject Hollywood's obsession with youth. By the time she stepped away from the spotlight, she had no interest in maintaining the illusion of eternal beauty. Wrinkles and aging didn't scare her. She embraced them. Instead of fighting time with surgery, she turned to activism, dedicating her later years to animal rights. Her transformation from screen goddess to recluse was shocking to some, but to her, it was liberation. In the 60s, these stars were at the top. By the time the next decade rolled in, their reflections told a different story. Linda Blair became a household name after The Exorcist, 1973. The film made her a horror icon, but Hollywood didn't know what to do with her afterward. She took roles in B-movies, struggled with personal issues, and ran into legal trouble, including a high-profile drug arrest in 1977. By the time she tried to revive her career in the 80s, the industry had moved on. Years of stress, fluctuating weight, and personal struggles took a toll. By middle age, she barely resembled the fresh-faced teen who once terrified audiences. Fame can be a double-edged sword, and for some, its sharpest cuts come long after the spotlight fades. Jan Michael Vincent had the looks and talent of a leading man. Hollywood saw him as the next Paul Newman, and with films like Big Wednesday, 1978, and the TV series Airwolf, 1984 to 1986, he had everything going for him, but he was his own worst enemy. Decades of alcohol abuse destroyed his career and his health. He was involved in multiple drunk driving accidents, with one in 1996 leaving him with severe nerve damage to his face. By his later years, he had lost a leg due to complications from an infection. The once dashing leading man was unrecognizable by the time he passed away in 2019. And then there was David Cassidy, teen idol, musician, and the face of the Partridge Family, 1970 to 1974. He spent the 70s dodging screaming fans and living the rock star dream. But by his 30s, the industry had moved on, and his career never fully recovered. Decades of heavy drinking took a toll on his appearance, making him look much older than his years. In 2017, he publicly admitted he was battling dementia, though the damage of alcoholism had already left its mark. His tragic final years were a stark contrast to his youthful, boyish image from the 70s. The 80s was a decade of indulgence. Big hair, big egos, and even bigger consequences. Some stars made it out intact, but others, not so much. Gary Busey was once the ultimate tough guy actor, earning an Oscar nomination for the Buddy Holly story in 1978. But a decade later, everything changed. In 1988, he crashed his motorcycle at high speed without a helmet. He survived, but the damage was permanent. The traumatic brain injury altered not just his personality, but also his physical appearance. His face became more rigid, his expressions less controlled, and over the years, his once rugged good looks took a drastic turn. The accident, paired with years of erratic behavior and alleged substance use, left him looking far older than his actual age. Not all transformations come from reckless decisions. Some happen without warning. Kathleen Turner ruled the 80s. That husky voice, commanding presence, and knockout looks made her a go-to leading lady in Body Heat, Romancing the Stone, and The War of the Roses. But behind the scenes, something was changing. In the 90s, Turner was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic autoimmune disease that attacks the joints, causing severe pain and swelling. The treatments were brutal. The medication, combined with the physical toll of the disease, altered her appearance in ways she couldn't control. By the early 2000s, fans were stunned. Her features had softened, her movement slowed, and the transformation was impossible to ignore. Then there's Val Kilmer. The man was Iceman. He was Jim Morrison. In Top Gun and The Doors, he didn't just play cool, he was cool. But by the 2000s, something was off. His weight fluctuated dramatically, fueling endless tabloid speculation. Whispers of health issues spread, but Kilmer denied it all. Then, in 2015, the truth came out. He had been battling throat cancer. The treatment was grueling. Surgeries and radiation took their toll, leaving him frail. His once powerful voice forever altered. By the time he re-emerged, fans barely recognized him. The transformation was shocking. The man who once exuded effortless charisma had been changed in ways no one could have predicted. Decades of non-stop touring, drug-fueled nights, and reckless living left some of rock's biggest icons nearly unrecognizable. Axl Rose was the 80s. The Guns N' Roses frontman had the cheekbones, the swagger, and the raw stage presence that made him larger than life. Then came the 2000s. Fans barely recognized him. His face looked dramatically different, sparking endless rumors. Plastic surgery, weight fluctuations, the toll of a hard partying past. His once slender frame expanded, and speculation about failed cosmetic work only added fuel to the fire. The welcome to the jungle rock god was gone, replaced by a version even die-hard fans struggled to accept. Steven Tyler, on the other hand, never hid his rock star vices. Heroin, cocaine, and decades of excess ran through his veins as much as his music did. While he still oozes rock star charm, the years have left their mark. His once smooth skin is now deeply lined, his features worn from a lifetime of indulgence. He still struts like the 20-something kid who sang Dream On, but his face tells a different story, one of survival and consequence. If anyone should be a medical anomaly, it's Ozzy Osbourne. By his own admission, he's done enough drugs and alcohol to take down an army. His body has survived everything: decades of substance abuse, a near-fatal ATV accident in 2003, and ongoing health battles. By the 2010s, the years caught up. Deep lines, sunken eyes, and permanent slurred speech became his new reality. The Prince of Darkness still endures, but the toll is impossible to ignore. The 90s was the era of blockbuster cinema, TV heartthrobs, and larger-than-life icons. Some reinvented themselves. Others weren't as lucky. Whether through personal struggles, career missteps, or simply time itself, some stars faded in ways no one expected. Brendan Fraser was one of the Hollywood stars of the 90s. The Mummy, George of the Jungle, Encino Man. His mix of comedic charm and leading man appeal made him box office gold. But behind the scenes, his body was breaking down. Years of high-impact stunts left him with serious injuries, requiring multiple surgeries on his back, knees, and vocal cords. His career slowed. A painful divorce and financial struggles made things worse. By the 2010s, his once athletic frame had changed, and he looked drastically different from the star audiences remembered. It wasn't until The Whale that Fraser made his big comeback, but his transformation over the years remained undeniable. Time away from Hollywood can be just as startling as the years spent in it. No one knows that better than Macaulay Culkin. The Home Alone star was the ultimate 90s child actor, but like many before him, growing up in the industry took a toll. By his 20s, he walked away from Hollywood. When he reappeared, fans were shocked. He looked frail, gaunt, and much older than his years. Tabloids speculated about substance abuse, though he denied it. His disheveled appearance had people concerned, but in recent years he's turned things around. His 40s look healthier than his early 30s ever did. Some transformations feel even more dramatic when they happen to figures once seen as invincible. Just look at Mike Tyson. In his prime, he was an unstoppable force, a heavyweight champion who struck fear into opponents with sheer power and intimidation. But the years weren't kind. Brutal fights, legal troubles, and financial missteps wore him down. By the 2000s, deep lines, weight gain, and a tired look made him seem far older than his age. For professional athletes, time isn't a luxury. It's an opponent they can never truly defeat. The relentless physical toll, the pressures of fame, and the lifestyle that comes with it often accelerate aging. Some retire gracefully, others go through transformations so shocking, even their biggest fans barely recognize them. Wayne Rooney is a prime example of a superstar who aged well beyond his years. He burst onto the scene as a teenager, England's golden boy, and a powerhouse forward with a relentless playing style. But by his late 20s, his body seemed to betray him. The years of carrying Manchester United and the England national team took a visible toll. His hair loss became a major talking point, leading to multiple transplants. While many footballers stay youthful into their 30s, Rooney's rugged, battle-worn look made him seem far older than his actual age. Basketball isn't any easier on the body. Shawn Kemp was a force in the NBA, a 6-time All-Star with explosive dunks and freakish athleticism. In the 90s, his lean, chiseled frame made him unstoppable with the Seattle Supersonics. But after retirement, things changed fast. Kemp's weight skyrocketed to over 300 pounds, a stark contrast to his high-flying prime. While plenty of athletes struggle to stay in peak shape post-career, his transformation was particularly shocking for fans who remembered him at his best. Then there's Diego Maradona, a legend who burned bright but paid the ultimate price for excess. The Argentine icon was worshipped for his dazzling footwork and the infamous Hand of God goal. On the pitch, he was untouchable. Off it, chaos, post-retirement, drug addiction, weight gain, and severe health issues took over. By the time of his passing in 2020, he was nearly unrecognizable from his World Cup glory days. Hospitalizations, scandals, and struggles with addiction painted a tragic picture of what happens when the body and mind can't keep up with the legend. Hollywood demands perfection, but aging is inevitable. Some embrace it, others fight it, and when plastic surgery goes wrong, the results are irreversible and often shocking. Mickey Rourke was once one of the most ruggedly handsome actors of his generation, a heartthrob in films like 9½ Weeks and Angel Heart. But after stepping away from acting to pursue professional boxing, his face took a beating, literally. Multiple injuries led him to undergo reconstructive surgeries, but the results were far from what he expected. His once chiseled jawline became distorted, and his features appeared unnatural. Over the years, he admitted to making mistakes with surgery, saying, "Most of it was to mend the mess of my boxing injuries, but I went to the wrong guy to fix my face." Fans were stunned by his drastic transformation, with some barely recognizing him when he returned to Hollywood in the 2000s. If there's one name that comes up in almost every discussion about botched plastic surgery, it's Donatella Versace. The iconic designer is known for her luxury fashion empire, but her face has been a major topic of speculation for decades. While she has never fully confirmed what procedures she's had, experts suggest excessive fillers, facelifts, and lip augmentation contributed to her dramatically altered appearance. By the early 2000s, her once striking features looked stretched and unnatural. Instead of looking younger, her cosmetic enhancements became more infamous than her fashion work. But she's far from the only celebrity whose transformation sparked endless speculation. Just look at Meg Ryan, who defined the rom-com era of the 90s. With her effortless charm and natural beauty, she was a household name. But when she reappeared in the 2000s, the focus shifted away from her career and onto her face. Speculation about lip fillers, Botox, and facelifts overshadowed her acting talent. Fans who had adored her in When Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle were shocked at how different she looked. While she's never confirmed details about the procedures, her transformation became one of the most widely discussed in Hollywood history. With constant public scrutiny and high-pressure lifestyles, many turned to drastic measures to keep up appearances. But time, bad decisions, and questionable procedures often had the opposite effect. Sharon Osbourne has never been shy about her plastic surgery. Over the years, she's been open about facelifts, Botox, and other cosmetic enhancements. But even she admitted when things went too far. After a facelift in 2021, she looked at herself and thought, "I looked like one of those fucking mummies." The work left her face distorted, and she eventually had some of it corrected. The relentless pursuit of perfection has led many down a path of drastic change, and Janice Dickinson was no exception. She made a name for herself as the world's first supermodel, but in later years her appearance became more about plastic surgery than high fashion. At her peak, she was one of the most striking women in the industry, but the chase for eternal youth led to years of extreme procedures, facelifts, Botox, fillers, and more. By the time she was judging America's Next Top Model, her exaggerated look had become a talking point. In recent years, she's been more accepting of aging, but there was a period when her obsession with surgery overshadowed her legacy. Not all dramatic transformations stem from Hollywood's beauty standards. Sometimes they happen in the most unexpected corners of entertainment. Scott Thompson, better known as Carrot Top, was once a quirky, red-headed comedian with a signature wild-haired look. But when he transitioned to a long-term Las Vegas residency, something changed. Fans started noticing his face looked completely different. Rumors swirled about Botox, fillers, and even plastic surgery, though he's denied most of it. The combination of aging, dramatic muscle gain, and possible cosmetic work made him almost unrecognizable. Whether intentional or not, Carrot Top's transformation became one of the most shocking among entertainers. Money, power, and influence can buy a lot, but they can't stop time or erase the effects of self-destruction. And few stars embodied that downfall quite like Charlie Sheen, who wasn't just a TV star. He was a phenomenon. In the 2000s, he became the highest-paid actor on television, pulling in nearly $1.8 million per episode for 2.5 Men. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling fast. His well-documented battles with substance abuse, public feuds, and a chaotic personal life took a serious toll. By his infamous 2011 meltdown, where he coined the phrase winning while clearly doing the opposite, his appearance had changed drastically. The once sharp features and youthful energy were gone, replaced by a visibly aged, gaunt look. Years of hard living had caught up, and even after stepping out of the spotlight, the damage was done. Self-destruction in Hollywood doesn't discriminate by age, and few stars proved that more than Lindsay Lohan, who was once the industry's undeniable it girl. The success of The Parent Trap, Mean Girls, and Freaky Friday made her one of the most in-demand young actresses of the 2000s. But by the time she hit her early 20s, she was more famous for DUIs and court appearances than films. Endless nights of partying, mugshots, and multiple stints in rehab visibly aged her beyond her years. By the time she attempted a career comeback in her late 20s, she looked significantly older than her peers. While she has since cleaned up her image, the toll of those reckless years remains visible. Few actors held on to their mystique as well as Johnny Depp, until they didn't. For years, he was the face of quirky, rebellious Hollywood cool, whether in Pirates of the Caribbean, Edward Scissorhands, or Sweeney Todd. But by the late 2000s and 10s, the combination of financial troubles, personal lawsuits, and years of reported excessive drinking started to show. Once known for his sculpted cheekbones and sharp style, he now appears bloated and weary, looking much older than his 60 years. The legal battles against his ex-wife and the public scrutiny surrounding his personal life only added to the visible stress. Fame can preserve a star's image in history, but real life always catches up. For these celebrities, the harsh truth is that no amount of fortune or influence can undo time's relentless march.
Today's celebrities get canceled over a tweet. Back then, these golden age icons got away with lawsuits, arrests, and full-blown cover-ups and still showed up to award shows like royalty. Errol Flynn defined morality laws. By the early 1940s, his reputation was out of control. Women, booze, and bar fights followed him everywhere. But in 1942, things got serious. He was accused of misconduct with 2 minors, a scandal that could have ended anyone else's career. Flynn didn't panic. He leaned into the spotlight. At trial, his legal team turned the courtroom into a circus. Fans camped outside. Reporters hung on every detail. Flynn smirked through it all, cracking jokes and signing autographs between breaks. He swore it was all lies. His defense claimed the girls were after money and fame. The jury believed him, or just didn't care. He walked out a free man. After the trial, he kept working like nothing happened. Warner Brothers stood by him. His next film hit theaters months later. The Scandal barely touched his career. That's when Hollywood realized something. Flynn was bulletproof. He once bragged, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." No one made him take it back. The phrase followed him for years, and he didn't mind. What should have ended his career only made him more infamous. He wasn't humbled. He doubled down. For the rest of the decade, he coasted on charm, controversy, and sheer arrogance. And the system let him. Bette Davis fought Warner Brothers. In 1936, Davis went to war with her own studio. Warner Brothers kept giving her weak scripts, one after another. She called them junk, and she was done playing window dressing in bad films. So she walked. Then she sued. Bette left for England and tried to work overseas, even though she was still under contract. She hoped a British court would let her break free. That didn't happen. Warner Brothers won the case, and Davis had to crawl back to Hollywood. She was broke, embarrassed, and technically in the wrong. But here's the twist. She still got what she wanted. Instead of punishing her, Jack Warner gave her better roles. Within a few years, she won her second Oscar for Jezebel. By 1942, she was the highest-paid woman in America. That lawsuit, it didn't hurt her. It made her iconic. She didn't just stand up for herself. She made a scene and then made history. On set, she demanded top billing, script approval, and even lighting control. She fought directors. She fired agents. She knew she was hard to work with, and she leaned into it. Clark Gable refused military duty. When World War II broke out, plenty of stars rushed to enlist. Jimmy Stewart signed up. So did Henry Fonda. But Clark Gable held off. At 41, he said he was too old. MGM wanted to keep him working, and he agreed. At first, the public let it slide. Gable had just lost his wife, Carol Lombard, in a plane crash while she was on a war bond tour. People gave him space, but then they didn't. Headlines started asking why the King of Hollywood wasn't in uniform. Stewart was flying combat missions. Gable was still filming. Under pressure, he finally enlisted in the Army Air Forces in August 1942. He went through training and even flew a few missions over Europe. But let's be honest, he was protected. Crews cleared the way. Commanders made sure he stayed safe. He narrated recruiting films and posed for photos in uniform. Gable was promoted to major in less than a year. Officially, he earned it. Unofficially, his fame helped. He served, yes, but not like the rest. After the war, the public forgave him. Hollywood welcomed him back with open arms. But those early months left a mark. He had waited. He hadn't rushed in like the others, and no one really forgot that. Joan Crawford, blackballed directors. By the late 1940s, her career was on a hot streak again, thanks to Mildred Pierce. That role earned her an Oscar. It also gave her more power than ever, and she used it without apology. On set, Crawford demanded custom lighting, last-minute rewrites, and approval over her co-stars. She kept a mirror near the camera to check her angles mid-scene. Directors who pushed back were iced out. She once had a cinematographer replaced because she didn't like how her cheekbones looked. Behind the scenes, she took notes on who crossed her. One director called her the toughest dame in the business. Another refused to work with her ever again. She didn't care. If a man had done the same, she claimed he'd be called brilliant. Crawford didn't just want control, she expected it. She studied scripts obsessively, annotated every page, and rehearsed alone under harsh lights to perfect her image. It wasn't about the role. It was about staying on top. Eventually, the studios stopped fighting her. They gave in. For years, she could get people fired with a phone call. Her enemies called her ruthless. Her fans called her unstoppable. But the industry never forgot how hard she was to manage. As she aged, the roles dried up. Directors passed. Producers hesitated. By the 1960s, Crawford was still a name, but no longer a threat. John Barrymore drank on set. By the 1940s, Barrymore wasn't just acting drunk. He was drunk. All the time. Once called the greatest stage actor of his generation, Barrymore had turned into a walking headline. Studios didn't drop him right away. He was still a Barrymore. But by 1940, his drinking had spiraled. On the set of Playmates, his last film, he couldn't remember lines. Crew members wrote cue cards and hid them all over the set. He'd stumble through scenes, reading from behind props, furniture, and even other actors. He made jokes about it. So did the press. People laughed, but no one was fooled. Barrymore was fading, and fast. Directors tried to work around him. Editors pieced together scenes like puzzles. But the truth was clear. He wasn't performing anymore. He was just showing up. He once said, "My only regret in life is that I didn't drink more champagne." That line stuck with people. It sounded charming. But behind it was a man no one could control. Studios still cast him out of habit. Audiences still showed up. At first. But eventually, even they stopped laughing. Barrymore died in 1942. He was 60. By then, his reputation had turned into a cautionary tale. Marlene Dietrich controlled her image. She never let anyone decide how she looked, ever. By the late 1940s, she had built a brand on mystery, beauty, and control. Studios might have paid the bills, but Dietrich ran the show. On every set, she brought her own lighting expert. Not to light the scene, just to light her face. She rejected costumes she didn't like, refused camera angles that didn't flatter. She even cut lines if she thought they didn't suit her image. She once told a director, "I make my own legend." And she did. She curated every still photo, screened every press interview, and approved how her films were edited. If her cheekbones weren't highlighted just right, reshoot. It wasn't just vanity, but strategy. Dietrich understood the power of visuals long before Instagram. She knew one bad angle could kill a career, so she never gave anyone the chance. Studios gave up fighting her. They let her do it her way because her films made money, and audiences were hypnotized. The smirk, the cigarette, the tailored suits, none of it was accidental. Other actresses followed rules. Dietrich rewrote them. Humphrey Bogart mocked studio heads. He didn't care what studio bosses thought. By 1950, he was one of the biggest stars in the world, and he acted like it. He called producers idiots, walked out of meetings, and openly mocked executives who tried to push him around. Warner Brothers didn't fire him. They needed him. After The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca, he was a box office guarantee, and he knew it. Bogart was one of the first actors to break out of the studio system. He hated the way they treated talent like property, so he fought back. He argued over scripts, swapped lines, and pushed back on casting choices. He even formed his own production company, Santana Productions, just so he could make the movies he wanted his way. In 1949, when Warner Brothers tried to force him into another gangster role, he refused. "I'm tired of playing the guy who shoots first," he said. He held out until they offered something better. On set, he joked with crew, but if he didn't like a director, you'd know, fast. He once told one, "You direct your way, I'll act mine." He wasn't always easy to work with, but he delivered, and that's what kept him safe. Lana Turner covered a crime. In 1958, Turner's life exploded into headlines. Her teenage daughter, Cheryl, had fatally stabbed Johnny Stompanato, Lana's abusive boyfriend. The killing happened in Lana's home, right outside her bedroom. The story dominated every paper in America. But Lana, she played it calm, tearful, but controlled. She told the court Cheryl acted in self-defense. The media framed it as a tragic domestic story. But behind the scenes, things looked messier. Stompanato was a known mob enforcer. He had threatened Lana repeatedly. Friends said she tried to end it, but he wouldn't go. When he showed up during a fight and Cheryl stabbed him, Lana made sure the story stayed on the daughter. The coroner ruled it justifiable homicide. No charges were filed. Lana walked free, and her daughter did too. But not everyone believed it was that simple. The studios jumped into crisis mode. MGM scrambled to manage PR. Lana's career was on the line, but instead of sinking, she bounced back. A year later, she starred in Imitation of Life, which became one of the biggest hits of her career. People whispered, "Did Lana protect Cheryl or take the fall for something else?" No one knows for sure, but she stayed famous. She stayed booked, and she never answered questions that made her uncomfortable. Montgomery Clift ignored doctors. He was supposed to be the next big thing. By the early 1950s, he was Hollywood's sensitive rebel, good looks, raw talent, and a quiet intensity directors loved. Then came 1956. One night, after leaving a party at Elizabeth Taylor's house, Clift crashed his car into a telephone pole. The wreck nearly killed him. His jaw was shattered. His face was never the same. Doctors warned him to take a long break, rest, heal, let the swelling go down. Clift refused. He rushed back to finish filming Raintree County, even though his face didn't match earlier scenes. You can see the difference on screen, before and after the crash. From there, things got worse. He relied on painkillers, alcohol, and sheer willpower to keep working. He couldn't turn his head easily. His speech changed, but he didn't slow down. He acted like nothing had changed. Directors adapted. Crews shot him in shadow. Editors worked around his injuries. Everyone tried to help, but only up to a point. The damage was physical, emotional, and visible. He became unpredictable on set. Sometimes brilliant, sometimes lost. Cliff didn't want pity. He didn't want limits. He believed he could act through anything. For a while, he did. But by the early 60s, his career stalled. His body gave out before his talent ever did. Frank Sinatra versus photographers. He didn't like being told what to do, especially not by the press. By the 1950s, he was one of the most famous men in America and one of the most volatile. If a photographer got too close, he lashed out. He broke cameras. He threw punches. He once had his bodyguards beat up a reporter who printed something he didn't like. Lawsuits followed. So did more headlines, but none of it stuck. Sinatra had friends in high places, politicians, lawyers, even mob figures. Rumors swirled about how much protection he really had. He denied everything, of course, and somehow it always blew over. Rumors circulated in 1957. A Look magazine photographer tried to snap a shot at a party. Sinatra grabbed the man by the collar and knocked the camera to the ground. No charges, no apology. Just more swagger, turned his temper into part of the brand. Old Blue Eyes wasn't just a nickname, it was a warning. You didn't cross him unless you were ready for the fallout. Studios didn't drop him. TV shows still booked him. He even won an Oscar for From Here to Eternity, proving that charm and talent still beat bad behavior. Judy Garland misperformances. She had the voice, the face, and the audience in the palm of her hand. But by the 1960s, she couldn't stay on stage long enough to finish a show. Years of studio pressure, pills, and emotional trauma had taken a toll. MGM started her on a certain pill as a teen to keep her awake during filming. Later, they gave her sleeping pills to knock her out. That cycle never stopped. By her 30s, she was struggling. On tour, she showed up late, or not at all. She forgot lyrics, slurred lines, or broke down mid-song. Fans still adored her. Venues still booked her. But every show was a gamble. In 1961, she made a stunning comeback at Carnegie Hall. The album became a classic, but even that high didn't last. Within 2 years, she was back to missed gigs and canceled concerts. Promoters warned venues. Co-stars crossed their fingers. She once told a reporter, "I'm always being Judy Garland. I'll never get to be just me." That pressure crushed her. Studios stopped calling. Television networks pulled back, but the public stayed obsessed. People wanted to save her or watch her fall. Sometimes both. She was still box office gold, but only if she showed up. That didn't always happen. Marlon Brando rewrote scripts on set. By the 1960s, Brando didn't follow scripts, but rewrote them. Literally. Directors would hand him a screenplay, and he'd toss half of it out. Sometimes he'd rewrite lines the night before. Sometimes on set. He refused rehearsals, changed blocking, delayed shoots. Brando didn't care. He was Marlon Brando. On Mutiny on the Bounty, he drove the entire production over budget and behind schedule. The crew resented him. Co-stars avoided him. But studios couldn't stop him. He was still bankable. He spoke in whispers during scenes, forcing sound teams to scramble. He demanded cue cards off camera when he didn't want to memorize lines. On The Godfather, he wouldn't even learn his dialogue. They taped it to nearby furniture. When a director objected, he shrugged. "I'll give you what I give you." And the thing was, when it worked, it really worked. Brando won Oscars, broke acting norms, and changed Hollywood. He knew it too. That made him harder to control. He refused press junkets, showed up late, insulted interviewers. But producers kept hiring him because he brought something no one else could. He once told an actor, "The only reason I'm in this business is because I haven't found anything else to do." That attitude defined him. Brilliant, unpredictable, and always in charge. Elizabeth Taylor demanded Vatican apology. In 1963, Taylor caused an international scandal and didn't flinch. While filming Cleopatra, she started an affair with co-star Richard Burton. The problem? Both were married to other people. Paparazzi caught them sneaking around in Italy. The world lost it. The Vatican's newspaper branded her with a scathing label implying moral indecency. Harsh words, especially from the Catholic Church. Most stars would have apologized. Taylor didn't. She fired back and demanded a retraction. She never got one, but it didn't stop her. The affair only made her more famous. Crowds followed her in every city. Magazines couldn't get enough. Studios panicked about Cleopatra, which was already over budget and behind schedule. But Taylor wasn't going anywhere. She became the highest-paid actress of her time, earning $1 million for one movie. She showed up late, fought with directors, and demanded rewrites. One producer called the shoot a slow, expensive disaster. Still, Cleopatra premiered. It bombed at first, but Taylor didn't. She married Burton, then divorced, then married him again. It became its own show. Taylor had gone from child star to tabloid queen, and she leaned into it. Warren Beatty refused to be edited. In 1967, Beatty didn't just star in Bonnie and Clyde, he produced it, and he controlled everything. Casting, shooting schedule, final cut. When the studio tried to re-edit the film, he threatened to walk. They backed down. Beatty was only 30, but already had a reputation. He'd rewrite scenes the night before, argue with directors, delay production until he got what he wanted. On Bonnie and Clyde, he clashed with almost everyone. But he also had the vision to see what the studio didn't. The film was revolutionary. Warner Brothers hated the first cut. They thought it was too violent, too weird, and wouldn't sell. Beatty disagreed. He fought for it, hard. He screened it himself, pushed critics to watch. When Time magazine gave it a glowing review, the tide turned. Suddenly, Beatty looked like a genius. The film became a hit. It got 10 Oscar nominations, and Beatty got credit for all of it. From then on, he expected control. He didn't just want roles, he wanted ownership. He took over every set he worked on, often slowing productions down to a crawl. But he didn't care. The final product mattered more. Katharine Hepburn banned interviews. By the 1970s, Hepburn was Hollywood royalty, and she acted like it. She stopped doing interviews, refused press tours, dodged award shows. If someone wanted a quote, she ignored them. If a reporter caught her off guard, she walked away. Studios didn't push her. They knew better. She made her own schedule, picked her roles, controlled her image. No manager, no press agent, no one speaking on her behalf. She once told a journalist, "I welcome opinions, but I don't listen to them." That about summed it up. For decades, she refused to play the game. And it worked. She kept getting roles, even as she aged out of the parts other actresses were begging for. She had a record, 4 Oscars, and she never showed up to accept a single one. People called her difficult. She called it freedom. Directors worked around her. Studios cleared her path. Younger stars respected her or feared her. She wore pants before it was fashionable. Cut her hair short when others were doing pin curls. She did what she wanted, always. By the time the media caught up, it was too late. Hepburn had built a career without ever giving herself away.
Studio publicity departments sold Golden Age Hollywood as effortless glamour. But surviving memoranda, police evidence logs, and physician reports tell a very different story. We've examined 10 documented cases of what was actually found inside the private dressing rooms of major studio actresses, from macabre props purchased on corporate invoices to rotting beauty preparations, toxic cosmetics, concealed alcohol, and narcotics logged into police custody. Each case is grounded in primary source evidence, and each peels back another layer of the image these studios fought to protect. Our first case begins with a set of Fox Film Corporation purchase invoices from Fort Lee, New Jersey. And finally, in first place, Fox Film Corporation's own paperwork leaves no room for rumor. In March 1918, the studio's Fort Lee, New Jersey lot processed invoice number FB 1918-072 from the Lower Broadway Medical Supply Company. The line items are explicit: 3 human skulls, 2 taxidermied ravens, 1 mummified armadillo, and a set of 5 porcelain jars described as Egyptian. The total cost, $212, appears in the margin, initialed by the set dresser. Days later, an internal memo preserved in the Fox Film Corporation production files, dated April 15, 1918, confirms receipt of these objects for Theda Bara's dressing room. The directive, titled The Vampire Image, orders the creation of a sinister, exotic environment to reinforce Bara's carefully constructed public persona. The memorandum's language is clinical. It instructs staff to procure and install anatomical specimens, taxidermied birds, and foreign jars as per the attached invoice. This was not an isolated whim, but a calculated exercise in image management, fully documented in the studio's own records. The Margaret Herrick Library's holdings include both the invoice and the memo, providing a rare, unbroken chain of evidence. No other case on record offers this level of verifiable detail. Theda Bara's skulls and macabre decor were not legend. They were a matter of studio policy, purchased, delivered, and installed under explicit instruction. The evidence sets the standard for what follows, not rumor, but the physical residue of Hollywood's backstage machinery. In second place, the Paramount lot's own records introduce a new category of backstage hazard. On July 21, 1924, a maintenance log entry for Building 12 notes a cheetah waste spill and a claw gouge on the floor near Dressing Room 2. The handwriting is terse, the language clinical. It reads like a janitor's account of animal detritus and damaged paneling filed alongside a repair order. The incident did not end there. By January 12, 1925, an internal memo circulated through Paramount's executive offices ordering the removal of Bonzo, the live cheetah kept for Pola Negri's publicity appearances. The memo cites a crew injury. A studio photographer attempting to capture the animal for a promotional still suffered a scratch to the chest. A brief statement from the injured man survives in the trade press, corroborating the physical risk. Unlike the props and cosmetic residues that fill other entries, this case documents a living, unpredictable presence, one that crossed the threshold from spectacle to liability. The building log, band memo, and press snippet together establish a chain of events that force the studio to act, not out of image management, but out of concern for crew safety. In the rigidly controlled environment of the studio lot, Bonzo's presence and the trail of damage left behind remains one of the most thoroughly documented breaches of the boundaries between performance and private space. Coming to the top 3, Universal's internal paperwork on Maria Montez exposes a collision between studio vanity and physical risk. A 1943 Wardrobe Department incident ticket, number U 1943-018, records a complaint from crew about her dressing room's temperature, locked at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The override was not accidental. Thermostat logs from Universal's technical services files confirm repeated manual adjustments to maintain this extreme heat, all at Montez's request. The reason appears in a physician's memo from Dr. Harold Klein, dated January 1944, warning production leadership that prolonged exposure to such heat could cause dehydration and fainting among staff. Yet the memo also authorizes Montez's preferred regimen: raw egg compresses applied to the face, olive oil masks left to ferment on skin, and imported creams of unknown composition. Inventory sheets attached to the thermostat log list 48 separate mirrors installed in her chamber, creating a closed environment of reflected heat and humidity. By September 1946, A fire safety inspection flagged the combination of organic materials and high temperature as a hazard, recommending immediate installation of a temperature regulator. These records, preserved in Universal's wardrobe and safety inspection files, document not only the breakdown of hygiene, rotting beauty treatments left to fester in a sealed, overheated space, but also the institutional willingness to modify building systems for a star's rituals. The result was an environment as hazardous to health and fire safety as any external threat, all born from the pressures of maintaining a Technicolor image in a studio that prized spectacle above well-being. Number 4. RKO's internal medical files on Constance Bennett expose a chemical hazard that reached far beyond the confines of vanity. A memo from February 10, 1932, signed by Dr. Samuel Hart and preserved in the Margaret Herrick Library, details Bennett's use of Coremlu, a depilatory cream laced with thallium acetate. The document's language is clinical but urgent, warning of cumulative toxicity and citing cases of hair loss, nerve damage, and even death linked to the product's active ingredient. The same memo inventories additional studio-supplied products: lead-based foundation, arsenic complexion wafers, and belladonna eye drops, all ordered through RKO's own procurement system. Purchase records from late 1931 confirm the routine restocking of these items for Bennett's dressing room. The danger was not theoretical. Just 1 month after the RKO memo, the Federal Register published a formal notice on March 15, 1932, prohibiting thallium acetate in cosmetics nationwide. The FDA ban, now cataloged in the National Archives, marked a rare moment when federal oversight intervened directly in Hollywood's backstage routines. These records, when viewed side by side, reveal a system in which the pursuit of screen beauty brought actresses into daily contact with substances now recognized as lethal. The presence of Coremlu and its chemical kin in Bennett's dressing room is not a matter of rumor or personal excess, but of institutional supply and regulatory failure. The archival evidence transforms the image of powder and rouge into a documented threat, one that forced the hand of federal authorities and left a toxic residue on the history of studio glamour. Number 5. MGM's own wardrobe complaint logs from April 18, 1925, record a persistent odor emanating from Mae Murray's dressing room, described as a mix of unwashed silks, decaying floral arrangements, and layers of heavy perfume. The entry, preserved in the USC Warner Brothers archives, notes repeated crew complaints and flags a possible chemical spill. Within 2 weeks, the problem escalated to the executive level. On May 2, 1925, studio manager J.J. Cohn issued a formal fumigation order, authorizing the use of chlorine gas throughout the affected corridor. The directive, cataloged in MGM's executive correspondence, mandated full evacuation of adjacent sound stages with safety precautions for both cast and crew. Technical services responded with a detailed impact assessment dated May 7, 1925, confirming a 3-day halt to all production activities in the vicinity. The report lists not only lost shooting hours, but also the cost of chemical treatment and post-fumigation ventilation. No narcotics or alcohol were cited in the findings, only the operational fallout from neglect and an overwhelming accumulation of organic and artificial odors. The records show that what began as a private hygiene lapse forced the studio to suspend its tightly regimented schedule, mobilizing resources at a scale rarely seen for a single performer's quarters. The episode stands out for its measurable disruption: a documented chain of complaints, an executive memo, and a production shutdown, all triggered by the breakdown of basic sanitary standards behind the locked door of a star's supposed sanctuary. Number 6. Paramount's internal records on Veronica Lake reveal a pattern of covert alcohol concealment that placed both crew safety and professional relationships at risk. A janitorial incident report dated September 12, 1944 describes the discovery of broken glass and vodka pooling beneath Lake's wardrobe rack. The report's language is clinical. Glass shards, clear liquid, pungent odor consistent with spirits, source, costume hem. This was not an isolated event. A costume alteration slip from March 5, 1945, signed by the department supervisor, orders the insertion of a 2-by-2-inch vodka bottle into the hem of a dress, citing a novelty effect. Yet the frequency of such modifications raised alarms beyond the wardrobe department. By June 18, 1948, actor Joel McCrea submitted a letter to Paramount's production office, stating in unambiguous terms, "I will not appear in any picture with Ms. Lake after recent incidents." The letter, preserved in the USC McCrea papers, references repeated disruptions on set and the hazards posed by concealed glass. In response, a studio memo limited Lake's dressing room access to 1 hour per day during the filming of The Sainted Sisters. The sequence of janitorial logs, alteration slips, and co-star correspondence forms a clear chain of evidence. Contraband alcohol was not only present, but actively hidden within costume seams, creating hazards for staff and eroding trust among colleagues. Paramount's records document a breakdown of the boundaries between personal refuge and workplace safety, setting the stage for the more severe contraband cases that followed. Number 7. Universal's legal and security files from January 14, 1932 record an incident that would reshape the studio's approach to privacy and surveillance. On that date, a lot-wide search uncovered a cache in Mary Nolan's dressing room. 4 morphine prescription slips, each under a different alias, 12 hypodermic syringes, 2 metal cookers, and 3 unlabeled brown bottles. The inventory is explicit and methodical, listing every item seized. Within weeks, the fallout escalated beyond the confines of studio discipline. On February 8, 1932, Nolan filed a contract dispute complaint in Los Angeles County Superior Court, alleging unlawful search and seizure of her personal effects, a rare legal pushback against the studio's growing authority. The episode's impact is clear in Universal's executive policy memo dated March 1, 1932, which instituted mandatory quarterly searches of all personal spaces on the lot. The language of the directive is bureaucratic but unyielding. Every dressing room, regardless of status, was now subject to scheduled inspection. This sequence of documents, search inventory, prescription log, court filing, and policy memo, traces a direct line from individual transgression to institutional regulation. The evidence marks a turning point, as the private refuge of the dressing room became a site of routine surveillance, its contents cataloged in the name of studio order and public image. Number 8. LAPD records from February 1922 bring the investigation into Mabel Norman's dressing room into sharp forensic focus. During the William Desmond Taylor murder probe, officers entered Norman's quarters at the Senate studio and seized a silver and tortoiseshell snuff box. The official evidence tag, logged as serial LA 1922-037, describes the contents in precise terms. Approximately 3 grams of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine, several paper envelopes, and a portioning mirror. The chain of custody form, signed by Officer J. Miller and countersigned by the forensic laboratory supervisor, documents each transfer of the snuff box through police hands, preserving the integrity of the evidence. Within 3 days, a Senate studio security memo dated February 15, 1922, acknowledged the seizure and advised that no further internal action be taken pending police review. The language of the memo is terse but decisive, reflecting the studio's awareness of legal exposure. Unlike rumors or second-hand accounts, these documents establish a direct, unbroken trail from the studio lot to the police evidence room. The presence of the snuff box, its cocaine, and the chain of signatures reveal not just a personal vice, but a moment when private refuge became a crime scene. Here, the boundaries between Hollywood myth and institutional reality collapse into the cold clarity of an evidence tag, one that survives as a silent witness to the era's hidden dangers. Number 9, Fox Film Corporation's own security files and the Los Angeles Police Department's photographic evidence converge on a single, harrowing scene inside Alma Rubens's dressing room. On January 22, 1929, a Fox security officer, acting on a studio directive, entered Rubens's quarters and conducted a search that would later be mirrored in the official Los Angeles Police Department report. The inventory is explicit. 5 used hypodermic needles, 3 glass ampules labeled for morphine, and an empty heroin pouch, all recovered from the vanity drawer. The Los Angeles Police Department case file, cataloged as 1929-001 Rubens, includes a set of black and white photographs, each item laid out, tagged, and logged. These images, though now subject to privacy redactions, remain accessible through the department's Public Records Division. The gravity of the discovery did not end with the raid. Fox's internal report, preserved in the studio's closed archives, notes the immediate suspension of Rubens's contract and references an external medical evaluation. Within 2 years, the consequences became institutional. On April 10, 1931, a summary from Patton State Hospital records Rubens's admission for what is termed psychotic disorder, probable opiate addiction. The hospital file, available only in redacted form due to privacy laws, confirms the diagnosis and the transfer from legal to medical custody. Unlike earlier cases, where contraband prompted only internal discipline or quiet removal, the Rubens file documents a direct pipeline from studio search to police action and ultimately to psychiatric commitment. The evidence, including photographs, security logs, and the hospital summary, lays bare the personal cost exacted by addiction within a space that was both refuge and surveillance zone. Here, the fantasy of stardom collapses under the weight of clinical detail, leaving only the residue of a life consumed by substances and the paper trail that followed her from the Fox lot to the locked wards of Patton. And finally, in first place, Metro's internal records on Barbara Lamar bring the narcotics narrative to its most unvarnished conclusion. On January 8, 1926, a studio memorandum signed by Executive E. Cox and preserved in the Metro publicity records ordered the immediate removal of a gold and purple velvet casket from Lamar's dressing room. The memo's language is precise. Secure all narcotics before transport. No euphemism, no attempt at ambiguity, just a directive to clear the casket and its contents from the grand piano where it had rested in plain sight. The studio's urgency was not misplaced. Dr. Harry Martin's prescription ledger, held in the Library of Congress Medical Prescription Collections, records a series of entries from December 1925 through early January 1926. Cocaine, morphine, heroin, all prescribed to B. Lamar. These are not rumors or tabloid embellishments. The ledger's handwriting, the memo's signature, the date stamps, each detail survives in institutional files and is cited by later biographers and cataloged in archival finding aids. Within days of Lamar's death, a press clipping from the Los Angeles Evening Post referenced the casket's discreet removal, echoing the studio's swift suppression. There is no record of disciplinary action, no public scandal, only the abrupt disappearance of the evidence and a sanitized official statement. In a system built to project glamour, the open presence of a narcotics cache, documented in both medical and studio records, forced the machinery of suppression into overdrive. The gold velvet casket stands as the most brazen display of illicit substances in any Golden Age dressing room, and the speed with which it was erased from the record reveals the depth of institutional complicity. Here, the boundary between private suffering and public image collapsed completely. leaving only a trail of paperwork and a void where a life and its evidence once stood. Across all 10 documented discoveries, one pattern endures. Beneath Hollywood's polished surface, primary evidence reveals rooms shaped by institutional control and personal strain. Police logs, physician reports, and studio memoranda strip away the illusion, exposing how glamour depended on unseen costs endured in isolation. These records remind us, every manufactured image conceals a reality, and the archives keep the truth for those willing to look. What do you see behind the studio door?